What's up everyone, Ivan from Darkglass here, and today I'll give you an overview of the latest Anagram firmware update, version 1.5.0. This new update brings 4 new blocks to the Overdrive and Distortion category: the Atomic Sands, the Green Pirate Fuzz, the Arc Dreamer, and the BE Kolme. I'll give you an overview of their controls, but first let's check out how they sound like. Now that we have updated the Anagram, we can find the new blocks under the Overdrive and Distortion section. Let's start with the Atomic Sands. Once we enter the block settings, we can find the first page of controls. The first one is the drive. And it controls the amount of saturation that we add to the signal. You can go from pretty clean to fairly distorted. So it's a very flexible control and it allows you to add just the right amount of grit to your desired tone. Then we have the presence knob. And as you can hear, it is accentuating the pick attack, the pick scrape that you hear in the signal. Then we have the treble control. Which on its own doesn't do much, but it is quite interactive with the presence control. So I would play around with both of them to dial in just the right amount of top-end signal. Then we move on to the mid-shift list, and you can pick between 500 and 1000 Hertz. Let's hear what the difference is. I'm gonna pick 500 and do a pretty considerable boost so that we can hear the difference when switching. you could hear, 500 Hz sounds more nasal and 1000 Hz is more aggressive. It has also the characteristic that it accentuates the pick attack. For the last knob on this page, we have the bass shift, and we can pick between 40 Hz and 80 Hz. If we then scroll to the next page, we have the bass gain control. That is bass at 80. As you could hear, 40 Hz is a bit rounder, more pillow-like, and 80 is a bit punchier. Then we move to the blend control, and this allows us to pick how much of the affected signal is going out of the block. And finally, we have the level control, which controls the master output of the block. One really cool thing about the Atomic Sans is that even at high gain settings, it sounds great without a cabinet block next to it. Let's move on to the next item on the list, the green prate fuzz. This one only has one page of controls. The first one being the distortion knob, which goes from pretty subtle to very aggressive. Then we move on to the tone on-off switch, which interacts with the tone knob that sits on the right. In the off position, changes to the tone knob won't affect the sound. Once we turn that on, we hear more upper frequencies the more we turn it clockwise. Then we move on to the level. And finally, a blend control that allows us to mix in clean signal to the affected sound. This is useful if you want to retain some more attack, articulation, and low end in your sound. Something to keep in mind is that if you turn down the blend, you need to compensate for volume. Now let's take a look at the BE Kolme. And notice that I have added an amp and a cabinet block because the distortion block on its own is going to be fairly aggressive. And even with the amp and cabinet, at neutral distortion settings, it's still a very high gain sound. The first control on the left is the gain. And even at completely closed, you still get some distortion. And as you can hear, it can get very aggressive very quickly. Then we move to the blend control, which allows us to mix in clean signal to the sound. Then we have a high EQ knob for the high frequencies. And also a low for the bass frequencies. These two EQ controls are very powerful, and a mild and conservative boost goes a long way. And finally, we have the level, which controls the output volume of the pedal. Finally, we have the Arc Dreamer. The first control is the drive control. And even at high gain settings with the drive at max, it's still somewhat mild. I'm going to compensate for the level and boost it all the way. So you can be pretty aggressive with the boost on the drive control on this pedal. Just remember to compensate for the level later. Then we have the treble control, which is an EQ control. Then a bass EQ control. And as you could hear, these two EQ controls are somewhat mild. You can also boost quite a bit without worrying about the signal being too harsh or too boomy. Then we move on to the level control, which works as an overall output volume. And finally, we have the blend control, which, just like in the other devices, it mixes in clean signal to the sound. Another cool use of the Arc Dreamer is to use it to push other devices into overdrive. If I select, for example, the Alpha and Omega and play without the Arc Dreamer, and then bring it in, it adds a different character to the drive. For more information on the Anagram, go to darkglass.com or click the link in the description below. Thank you for watching, don't forget to update your device, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.